So the story is a quiet English diplomat played by Ralph Fiennes begins a relationship with a feisty firebrand idealist played by Rachel, insert correct pronunciation here. And they become, in the wake of her death, which happens very, very early on in the movie, so I am not giving away the end, he basically uncovers a web of political and personal intrigue which revolves around drug companies and their exploitation of the third world, in which she is very active as a fighting force. Now, the thing about Constant Gardener is this. It's almost, a dead cert for Oscars in the same way that The English Patient was. It is very intelligent. It has an interesting visual style, and I think Reyes really does know how to film his locations, which is something that he demonstrated very well in City of God, of which I was a great fan. And I think Rachel Weisz, however, what I thought it was Weisz until you said whatever it was that you said.
I'm sure you know.
Is terrific, and I think that she deserves accolades. As far as the rest of it is concerned, I have some problems. One of them is that I don't think Moraes is the world's greatest storyteller, and this is a very spiralling, convoluted narrative that I think needs a slightly firmer touch. Certainly, for my money, about halfway through, the film suffered from that thing which films should never suffer from, which is a slight case of tedium. And as that happened, you're in the middle of this kind of very realist, I mean, it's interesting, the email that you just read out then said, almost documentary feel. You're in the middle of this very realist world, which starts to then tip over into melodrama and ends up in a melodramatic conclusion that I thought was actually rather silly. I think that he understands the feel of Nairobi slums brilliantly, but he's not so sure-footed in the English Corridors of Power. It's something he says himself, that he thought that it gave him an outsider's perspective. I think it gives it a slightly caricatured perspective. I'm not wowed by Ralph Fiennes' performance. I think it's a perfectly fine performance. But as with The English Patient, I think that what's starting to happen is that the apparent weight of the source material and the subject is making the film seem more important than it is. Now, let me be absolutely clear about this. It's not a bad film. It's just not a great film. What it is an interesting, intelligent and ambitious film that works about half the time and then stops working. And at the point that it stops working, you are kind of carried along by a moral outrage rather than a dramatic involvement. In the end, I think it's a film to be admired rather than enjoyed. I think that there are great performances in it, but I think there are also duff performances in it. And I think that it is a film which has more on the surface than there actually is underneath. I don't doubt for 1 minute that these issues are very important and that it's brave of the film to tackle them. That doesn't mean it's a great film, and one should always remember that, as with something like Gandhi, just because the subject matter is important doesn't necessarily mean the film is. It's a better film than Gandhi, but then so is almost everything.